Wow, what an awesome commercial from one of our sponsors. Okay.
That really was. I'm putting this up while we're through the rest of the day. If you want to talk about it, you've got it going.
I'm sorry, what's that, Kathy?
Oh, I just said, I believe I'm sharing the Be Ready Utah. What would you do if you had 10 minutes? Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. And I can see that.
Okay.
I can see that meme, right? And I did just want to mention those some interesting statistics there. 50%, I think it said half of people live within 50 miles of the coast. That's an interesting one. But I just wanted to also kind of just mention our appreciation for our partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That video is just a little bit of a tease for our upcoming session with the Corps of Engineers being a part of the presenting team and the panelists there. Hunter and his folks, along with our very own Division of Emergency Management, Kathy Holder. And I know our moderator will talk more about this, but I just wanted to mention our appreciation to Kathy Holder for putting the technology together for this webinar, the GoToWebinar software program, and the training and all the coordination that she has provided for this. Couldn't have done it without her. She will be one of our upcoming presenters as well.
Okay, according to my clock, we are 4 o'clock straight up. So, hi everybody, I'm Brian Stinson. I will be moderating this next presentation, the Flood After Fire. And our presenters today are Danae Olsen. She's worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Sacramento District, for 4 years, but's relatively new to project management with the Corps. She has her preliminary teaching credential in the state of California and managed several projects while serving with the Peace Corps as an education and youth development coordinator in the Democratic Republic of Georgia. Very exciting. And Elise Jarrett has been a water resource planner with the Corps of Engineer, also the Sacramento District, for 2 years. Excuse me. In this role, she works with communities across California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado on various flood risk projects. Prior to joining the Corps, Elise worked with the Nebraska Department of Natural Resources Integrated Water Management Division for 4 years, developing water management plans across the state. Hunter Merritt is a public involvement specialist and water resources planner for the Army Corps of Engineers Sacramento District. He's been part of the Corps for 11 years, starting with public affairs and moving to planning division in 2011. He has been the Silver Jackets deputy for the Corps Sacramento District in California, Nevada, and Utah, and his focus has been on flood risk awareness, education, and outreach. And last but not least, Kathy Holder serves as the Utah State Floodplain Manager, National Flood Insurance Coordinator for the state of Utah. She has 12 years of experience in emergency management. She's a certified floodplain manager. She holds a position on the board for the Utah Floodplain and Stormwater Management Association. She holds degrees in Masters of Business Administration and a general science degree. She's taught at the university level for 11 years. So we have a lot of experience and knowledge coming at us, telling us all about floods and fire. I'd encourage everybody to check out the underneath your handouts tab. We have the U.S.ACE support and toolkit handout and also flood after fire fact sheet. So without any further ado, turn the time to you all.
Thanks so much, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. I very much appreciate this. We were really excited to come and visit you March 13th in person for the Be Ready Expo, and we were sadly had to decline the opportunity because of the beginning of this pandemic. And boy, it has been a long year for us as well as many of you, I'm sure. I just really want to commend Kathy in particular, as Wade said, Kathy's been working behind the scenes on this technology, and everybody on this Be Ready team, Be Ready Utah team has really pulled together to make sure that we can try to get this information to you virtually. So I commend them, and I commend all of you for sticking through this to be part of this. It's a lot. It's a lot of dedication to focus in on the digital space, and I think our last speaker really tapped into the truth about some of the stress that causes this has caused us. I know that my wife teaches 4th grade, and my kids are in middle school, and I'm working all in the same office, if you will, here at the house. They are out today, or at least this point, so it's actually quiet around here. I wanted to say I also appreciate very much Danae and Elise carrying this message today, because while there are many things that I've been excited to learn and teach, the flood after fire topic is one that I would like to learn as much as you all. So I'd like to move to the next slide. I think Elise is the person driving the slide. This is designed to try to give you all a little bit of information about the Corps of Engineers. Also, it was mentioned in our bios that, or at least my bio, that I've been part of Silver Jackets, and that little logo down in the bottom right corner is our logo. I won't spend much time with that. Danae is going to take that on. And then after that, Danae and Elise are going to talk a little bit about what is a debris flow, because that's really the driving factor on flood after fire risk, and then some of the hazards and some of the ways that we can learn more about what might happen if there is some precipitation on burn scars, etc. So if you had a chance to look at the video, the little commercial that we played, and if you didn't, there's a URL link in the chat space. The Corps of Engineers is the oldest federal agency. We were formed 2 days after the Continental Army. And we have been working on problem solving ever since, and there are many problems to solve. I would say that one of the areas that we have the most involvement is flood risk, although navigation is actually our largest mission. And you saw some of the little statistics in the commercial. But fire, and the fire risk is not one that's in our particular area. Of course, we are one of the federal agencies that stands ready to respond to disasters and all forms of disasters. So we have been tapped to respond to things like hurricanes. We've been tapped to respond to obviously flooding from other areas, and in flood after fire is a hazard. And most recently, we were responding to the COVID crisis by helping to build some hospitals, some emergency hospitals. So we have a lot of different ways in which we can bring resources. We are learning as much as any agency is about how we can help, and we'd like to learn from you all what needs there are. Many of the things that we are known for, such as mapping and engineering, are things that can benefit a flood after fire environment. So once again, my name's Hunter Merritt, but what's important is I want you to meet Danae and have her speak a little bit about Silver Jackets, and she and Elise to share about flood after fire. I will monitor the chat and reinforce messages and send you lots of links, and hope to engage in a conversation about this topic at the end of your day, at the end of this week. So thanks for being with us. Danae, tag, you're it. Oh, you're on mute.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Hunter. Happy to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. So there's a lot of exciting work being done at the Corps of Engineers, and I wanted to start by sharing one of the great programs that we have under our Floodplain Management Services Authority, and that is Silver Jackets. So Silver Jackets is a national program whose main purpose is reducing flood risk. We aim to have a team ready before a team is needed. And there are Silver Jackets teams in states all across the United States. And those teams bring together state, federal, and sometimes tribal and local agencies to learn from one another about ways to reduce flood risk and other natural disasters. So by applying their shared knowledge, the teams enhance response and recovery efforts when such events do occur. So Silver Jackets projects are usually 12 to 18 months long, and the Corps typically provides up to $150,000 of support. Each dollar invested by the Army Corps of Engineers leverages another dollar in project-focused partner contributions. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share some of the current Army Corps of Engineers Sacramento District flood after fire support projects that are happening right now in Utah. First, I wanted to talk about Mapleton, Utah. There was a recent fire upstream of the Mapleton, Utah community, and the Weather Service had said that a 1/4 inch of rain in 15 minutes, just your run-of-the-mill thunderstorm, would cause a debris flow. There are properties at Basin Outlet which have been put on evacuation alert for 60 days. The Army Corps of Engineers was contacted to see how they may be able to support Utah through our PL 8499 Advanced Measures Program, as well as through ERDIC. ERDIC is the Army's Engineer Research and Development Center. The Army Corps of Engineers has outlined support options to the Utah Department of Emergency Management, and they plan to coordinate with our program manager here at the Corps should they choose to request Corps support in Mapleton. Another recent place in Utah where the Corps has been providing support is the city of Saratoga Springs. In late June of this year, approximately 13,000 acres burned in and around the city of Saratoga Springs. This destroyed several major drainage ways above highly developed areas, which caused concern for potential flood and debris flows. Since the city has a current Silver Jackets project and is working with the Corps, the city reached out to discuss what information from the current alluvial fan mapping efforts could assist with mitigation strategies, as well as how the Corps could support the city as they prepare for the possibility of flooding after this fire. ERDIC, again, that's the Army's Engineer Research and Development Center, is taking the lead on modeling efforts to determine flow estimates in the impacted areas, which will help inform mitigation strategies to minimize risk. Both the Sacramento District and the Albuquerque District of the Army Corps of Engineers are providing support on this effort. And we also wanted to share with you an upcoming opportunity to participate in a free webinar. That webinar is going to be next week. It's about preparing for floods after fire. And this free webinar will be hosted by the Watershed University team. It's next Tuesday from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock Utah time. And we'd love to have you join. We'll make sure to post the registration link in the chat. Next slide. So we've uploaded a file, as Brian mentioned, to the GoTo platform, and it's titled U.S.ACE, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Flood After Fire Support and Toolkit. And you can find it by going to the handouts dropdown. The first document in this file is a flyer that provides an overview of some of the current flood after fire efforts that the Corps is supporting, in addition to the ones that I mentioned earlier. And the other document is information on a resource the Corps of Engineers recently developed, the Flood After Fire Toolkit. So we encourage you to check out those resources. So now we want to kind of delve into more of the technical components of debris flows and other post-wildfire hazards. I'll pass it over to Elise.
All right, thanks so much, Danae. So as you mentioned, our next couple of slides will touch base on post-wildfire hazards and then kind of walk through the anatomy of a debris flow. which is one of the biggest risks and hazards following a fire. And so just because the flames are put out doesn't mean that the danger is gone. And so several post-wildfire hazards can persist for weeks, months, or even years following a wildfire. And sometimes, you know, in these communities that have just experienced a wildfire and are trying to find what those next steps in the recovery process are, some of these hazards aren't necessarily on their radar, but are things that are very important to be aware of. And so some of those include flash flooding and debris flows, which I'll discuss a little bit more in the next slide. Rock falls, structural damage to both personal and community infrastructure, road instability. This can include cracking or erosion, and then also damaged trees. And so kind of maybe the follow-up question would be, why is there a higher risk of flooding following a fire? And kind of the overarching reason for that is when a fire moves through an area, it creates a lot of heat, which alters the environment makeup. And so it changes the soil properties from being absorbent to being repellent. And when that happens, either flash flooding or debris flows can follow. And they can kind of, and flash flooding can lead into debris flows. So what is a debris flow? And so it occurs when a rainstorm comes through an area, and when water begins to run downhill, it then begins to collect different kinds of debris. So that can be ash, sand, silt, soil properties, twigs, trees, boulders, pretty much anything in its path can start to accumulate. And then you have this massive flow heading downhill. And so really following a fire, there can be kind of three main ingredients that can play into whether or not a debris flow could be a possibility. And so that's one, is there a burn scar? Two, if a rainstorm will be present. And then three, if there's a slope involved. And so if you have those three ingredients, that can predict or be very likely that a debris flow can happen. And so debris flows can be fast moving and very destructive. They can occur with little warning. And they can also, once they start to move through an area, they can block drainages, they can damage structures, and they can also be very unpredictable. And so just because you may hear that a storm may be happening a couple miles, uphill, or a couple miles in a different direction when you're located, they can actually travel for several miles. And as I mentioned here, that they can be very unpredictable in their direction. So it's very important to be watching the weather alerts, the weather channels, to see what's going on so that you can move to safety if needed. And this figure here is just showing a house that was in the trajectory of a debris flow. And so it's been fully engulfed, and there's just the mud and the boulders have completely come all the way up to the house. And there's a guy there on the right side, and his head is almost at the roof level. And so they can really do a lot of damage. And so for the anatomy of a debris flow, and so this graphic here is showing the normal conditions of the environment. And so you have the soil, you have a healthy organic layer of vegetation, you have a good root structure holding that in place. And the soil here is acting like a sponge. It's porous. When it begins to rain, it'll absorb most of that water and really reduce the runoff. And then moving to what the environment looks like following a wildfire, you can see how that changes quite a bit there. So once the wildfire occurs, the soil components are altered, and it changes from those absorbent properties to a repellent layer. And so when that happens, the water is no longer able to act or to absorb. The soil no longer acts like that sponge, and instead it's acting similar to a parking lot, pavement, it can't be penetrated and the water will just run off. And so when that begins to happen, the water will come down and then it'll start to run down slope and it'll begin to pick up the ash, burned vegetation, boulders, really anything in its way will begin to be picked up in that slide and accumulate. And then this is just a final graphic kind of showing what happens. So as the debris flow begins to move down slope, it usually will begin to pick up speed and can be very destructive. It can occur rapidly and it's powerful enough to uproot trees. We've seen some videos of cars being carried. So it's just very important to be aware of, what's going on in the environment and the weather following a wildfire. All right, so I will pass it back over to Danae just to walk through this graphic and just a few things to keep in mind when talking about flood and debris flows.
Great, thank you, Elise. So how can you be prepared after a flood or a debris flow? First, avoid walking through moving water. Just 6 inches of water can sweep an adult off their feet. Also, do not attempt to drive through a flooded area. Just 12 inches of water can sweep a car away. So that's all we have for you today, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation and found the information beneficial. I believe there'll be time for questions after the next presentation, and you can also please feel free to reach out to us by email or let us know in the chat if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to just kind of, as we hand the baton off to Kathy, say once again, thank you, Kathy, for working with us and and encouraging us to present on this topic. The Silver Jackets initiative that Danae talked about is a state-led initiative. There's one in every state, and the Utah Division of Emergency Management, which is where Kathy works, is the lead for Silver Jackets projects in the state. So it's really appropriate for you to go next and tell us kind of how it really comes home. So thanks again for letting us be part of this, Kathy.
Oh, no, thank you guys so much. And I do I'm very thankful for our relationship that we have with the Army Corps. They do so many great projects in our state, and they are so helpful with our flood program. And so I really thank you guys. In my position as the state floodplain manager, I have many duties. Some of it's compliance, some of it's outreach to citizens or to the communities. And when I have an opportunity to talk to the citizens, there's some very important messages that to me are important because I go out and I see what happens in our state when we do have flooding events. And yes, Utah does have a flood risk. We may be considered in many places to be a desert state, depending which part of the state. But we do have a flood risk, and oftentimes it's just rain events coming in. And with those rain events, looking at this flood after fire, as they talk about that risk, it elevates that risk, and really those flows can go just about anywhere with that. I want to ask you guys a question, and this is a question about how you mitigate your risk. And I'm going to have Brian pull this poll question up for me right now.
It's up. Everybody, if you could answer the question. Does homeowners insurance cover floods? Yes or no? Half of us have voted. Give you another 10 seconds or so here. Okay, we're closing the poll. Looks like 7% said yes, 93% said no.
Okay, so we have some pretty well-educated Utahns here. And if you didn't know it, you don't need to feel bad because quite honestly, several times when I've gone out to flood disasters in Utah, I have had citizens say, I thought my homeowner's insurance would cover this. So however you answer on that, you know, I'm glad that we're getting some more education out there about this. But yes, that is one fact. And that's one of the key messages I want to bring to you, because anytime we're looking at a natural disaster, say flood or earthquake or landslides or things like that, oftentimes we're the ones as citizens that are left holding the bag or the bill that comes along with that disaster. There are some helps that come along, but overall, for our personal property, we have to take care of ourselves. And sometimes people don't realize that that is a big piece that needs to happen, but it truly is. And so I wanted to make sure that you know that your homeowner's insurance does not cover flood, and most properties insurance, um, it's even getting less that it will cover the fires. We're seeing insurance companies that are coming out after having these wildfires and starting to drop some of the fire coverage in those wild urban interland interfaces where people are right up against the wildland. So you do have to be buyer beware and be very aware of what goes on with how you mitigate your risk. So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about a program that we do have in Utah, a flood insurance program, and that is the National Flood Insurance Program. It has some subsidized insurance. It's federally backed, and any community that participates in the NFIP, which 230 of our communities do in the state, that is the majority of them. There's only 20 some odd that do not. So most of you do have this opportunity. Usually there's a 30-day wait. Now we do have so many communities here in Utah that have been affected by wildfire. And in case you weren't aware, you might want to check with your community itself. We have had several wildfires in Utah County. We've had wildfires in Carbon County. We have had wildfires over in Duchesne and Wasatch and Summit and Washington County, and you know, in the middle of the state as well. So we do have a lot of areas that are at higher risk, and you need to check with your community to see, am I at higher risk? Check with your emergency manager at your community. It might be at a city level, it may be at a county level, to see if you have a risk. If you've heard of a fire that's been on an area near you or upstream or up mountain from you, then you should be checking on this and see if this is something you should be mitigating your risk with. So we do have building contents, residential, commercial, renters, and there's what's called a preferred risk. And why I mention this, it's really important for our youth funds because we only have about 10% of our flood risk mapped in the state. So most people could actually get a preferred risk policy because you will not be in that high risk area. So something to talk to your insurance agent about. And I'm going to kind of move through some of these really quick because we don't have a lot of time, but there is an exception to that 30-day wait on some of these wildfires, but there are many pieces that have to happen for that. You just go out and buy a regular NFIP policy, and then at the time of adjustment, if it has come off of the fire was started on federal lands and the water's come off those federal lands, then you may be able to waive that 30-day waiting period at the time of adjustment. Something I just wanted you to know really quick. There are private policies and there are NFIP policies. You buy them both from your regular insurance agent. And I just want you to be, as a consumer, aware to ask your agent, what is this covering? How big is my deductible? I've had people that have had a private policy that had a 20% deductible, and that ended up being like $40,000. So you really have to be buyer beware and look at every piece of your policy when you go out to get a policy. I'm not going to talk too much about flood insurance rate maps because I know we're short on time, but the higher risk areas and the ones that cost more for purchasing the flood insurance, but are still usually decent if you've built in compliance, but there is a higher risk and cost a bit more, is in these high risk areas that are have been mapped into the FEMA special flood hazard area in your community's maps. Just so you know, you can go to this msc.fema.gov to see if that's there and if you may have to pay a little bit more for that insurance. I want you to talk to your insurance agent if you think you're in one of those high risk areas. I also would want you to talk to your insurance agent anyway. I don't live in a high hazard area. I'm not down from a burn scar, but I have a preferred risk policy because I know I have a risk. I also have a risk-weight policy. I work in emergency management. I watch what happens. So I'm not telling you to do anything that I wouldn't do. And now moving on past, a little bit past insurance. I always go back to insurance because I know it's the best thing you can do to mitigate. But just some things you can do before a flood. Actually, I would recommend that if anytime you're pre-insurance for any kind of insurance, you would go out and you take a video camera or take your phone or whatever you have, and you take pictures of how everything looks now when it's all beautiful and wonderful. And then you're going to make sure that you take pictures later too. But that sets up a precedence for how your structure looks now, and even if you get federal disaster assistance that may come into play on something, you need to be able to prove how you were before and then how you were after, and what came and happened to your property. Develop a family. Okay, you need to develop a family emergency plan and prepare your house for whatever may be coming your way. Here's another list, and we'll make sure this is available on the website because we only have a few minutes left to go. But there are a list of supplies, and you could go to Be Ready Utah, and they will have a lot of these lists as well. That's a look at your disaster kit and things to have ready. Also, sign up for the emergency weather alerts. Your first place to go is to find out what your community is going to put their alert out on, and turn those alerts on your phone. I know a lot of people turn off because they bother them, but quite honestly, if you're in one of these areas, I keep mine on anyway. You're going to want to be able to be alerted. During a flood, go to the higher ground. Don't attempt to walk through the water. Listen to the direction of your local officials. And if you come into contact with floodwaters, there's all sorts of nasty stuff in floodwaters. Make sure you wash and disinfect. And one of the biggest things I would say, if I got nothing else out, was if you're down burn scar from an area and you know you're at higher risk, please stay out of the basements, especially at nighttime. Don't have children or people with disabilities living in basements. If the debris flow comes, the floodwaters come, it can actually push right in there, and we have seen people lose their life to this. So that would be one thing. If you're at higher risk, my advice would be stay out of the basements until that risk has become lessened, or if you know there's a storm coming, definitely stay out of those basements. Then again, as I said, pictures before and pictures after. You need to take your pictures before you start cleanup, because they need to say how badly damaged, how high the mud, how high the water and the muck got. So those are my important points. And there are several agencies that help with disaster. Red Cross is one of those. We rely on them heavily, and a lot of other religious groups in the area. So they are our partners and can help out too. I'm going to give you, here's my contact information. And I want to, for us to be able to go to question and answer time. Like I said, we will have our slides available, and I hope you stick around for a little commercial that we put together for the state to remind you of what you need to do to mitigate your risk after we do questions and answers. So I will bring everybody back up for question and answers.
Okay, invite all of our panelists back. Danae and Elise, if you can pull up your cameras. All right, we have a bunch of questions. I also invite our panelists that once we're finished here, some of them are specific questions. If you wouldn't mind going into questions afterwards and answering some of those. But let's start at the top. Richard asks, how much has the flood rise been increased by the West Coast fires that have occurred this year? When will the greatest danger period, fall or spring, summer, fall, winter occur? Who would like to answer that one?
I'll start, but that doesn't mean that I will be the best source of information. I'll reiterate that we're having a Watershed University webinar next week on that, largely to a California audience, and I would wager that that audience, the presenters in that case, will probably have a lot more hard data. But my answer to that question is the first year to 2 years after a fire is obviously going to be the highest risk, and that's just because vegetation hasn't had an opportunity to reintroduce itself and firm up the burn scar. Sometimes the burn scar is too deep for anything to be planted, and so when you have one of those super fires, those super hot fires, which California and other states have all experienced here as a result of some of the forests that hadn't experienced fire in so long, that a lot of those fuels were just waiting to be cooked in a really hot fire, and we've even had fire tornadoes. The super hot fires will burn the top layer, and then that will cause vegetation to have a harder time reintroducing itself. I do know we had some conversation with somebody about aggressive planting of to remediate that a bit, but the short answer to it is yes, California is going to be at higher risk of flooding due to these many fires that we've had. Yes, this year is probably a high danger year, and the next season after will probably continue to be so, which is why we're really all hands on deck trying to address it. Elise, Danae, do you have anything else about California or anything else about that particular question?
Not is there a certain time of the year, and this wouldn't necessarily just be California, is there a certain time of the year, a certain season that is more dangerous after the fire than another time of the year?
I'll pick up a piece of that. So here for Utah, if we're looking at any time we're going to be having rainstorms, so that could run through summer, that could run through spring, fall. We get a little bit better off when everything freezes up and we get snow for a while, depending how much snow we get and then how fast that melts. But for this flood after fire risk, we do worry about it most when we're having any of the rainstorms. And our fire season and flood season, it just seems to be rolling around the year. Actually now, I'm pretty sure it's that way on the West Coast as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we would like for there to be a lot of snow and then for it to melt very slowly. That would be perfect. But conditions have changed a lot, and we are experiencing more rain where we used to experience snow, and that kind of flash flooding situation is of particular interest, and that could happen anytime in the rainy season for us. California, that's generally November to May.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the next question. Dean says floodplain maps were just updated in my county, he says in Summit County, Utah. The question is FEMA the agency that holds all current floodplain maps for the country?
So FEMA helps to produce the maps. Each map is produced in conjunction with the state and with each community. And so once those maps go effective, which Summit counties will be going effective, they're prelim right now. They will go effective in March 23rd, I believe. And when they go effective and the community adopts them, they're then the community's maps. Yes, they're housed. You can go to the msc.fema.gov website to get those maps, but your community houses them. Your community, they're your communities, and if changes are made or changes are made in the community, it's the community's responsibility to make sure those maps get updated until another map update comes around on a large scale.
Okay, thank you. Some other people have asked specific questions about specific burn scars. Is there a place that people can go to get that information? What is being done to mitigate in certain areas?
So what I would tell them to do is go to their community's website. Most of the websites, I know, like Mapleton, I think was on here. Mapleton did a wonderful effort in their outreach. We did have community meetings where we had all our state and federal partners come out and talk to the citizens via webinar like this. And we gave out lots of resources, but their emergency management on their website has put a ton of great information and has all those thoughts and things there. And that is the case with most of these communities. Utah County's been very proactive.
Okay. I apologize for perhaps mispronouncing this name, but Les Lakai asks, why doesn't flood insurance cover basement flooding?
So it does cover basements to a certain extent. There is limited coverage, and this is the NFIP policy I'm talking to, not a private policy. It covers all the major things. Your heater, it does cover, well, your heater, your electrical, your building itself. It will take everything back to a good place, except for what I call, and I don't know if FEMA likes me to call it this, but it used to be FEMA that taught me this, the pretties. It doesn't put in your wallpaper or your paint or your carpet, but it'll bring everything back up about your structure in the basement. Now, the other things will be covered on other levels, but I mean, honestly, I know we love our basements in Utah, but they are the highest risk area and not the safest in a flood.
Okay, so you're saying only structure is replaced? Because this person also asked about drywall, and you already mentioned carpet.
Yeah, it does do drywall. It takes everything back to like the drywall. You just don't get the finishing touches of paint and carpet. It also only is very limited as far as if you get the stuff that's in your house. I'm not getting the words, not coming to me right now, but your contents. It's limited content coverage in the basement as well. It actually only covers things on contents like your washer, your dryer, your freezer and food in it. Quite honestly, FEMA is just trying to get you back to where you can have your structure in your house. They're not going to make you totally whole with their insurance. On the other levels of your house, a lot more is covered, but the basement is limited.
So we can't rely on FEMA to put all the king's horses and all the king's men to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
No,
Okay.
it is there to have your house to live in and you to move forward.
All right. Bonnie asks, what's the website for the flood risk?
So there are a few of them. The one I think I had on mine was floodsmart.gov, which we can put in there. And we have floodfacts.utah.gov as well. Those both are some good websites. The Corps has them as well.
Okay. And why is there a difference in flood insurance between mud flow and debris flow? You have to buy both, which doesn't seem fair. Is there two kinds of insurance there? Flood and mud flow?
NFIP covers mud flow, and it's not the debris flow. It's a landslide type stuff that it doesn't cover. So the best way to look at it, at least another one of those silly sayings or whatever, that when I was learning this was, if it's like a chocolate shake, it's going to be covered. If it's like chocolate cake, it's not. And that's when it's flowing. That's not when it's stopped. You know, you're going to get a bunch of stuff that comes and stops in one of these situations. It's, you know, as it's going over land, is it flowing, or is it like a big chunk of land coming down at you?
Okay. And then our final question, unless somebody else posts one in the next couple of moments. Mark asks, I would love to hear how the soil changes after a fire to make it repellent. That sounds kind of a scientific thing. What kind of changes happens to the soil?
You guys want to take that?
Yes, Elise or Danae, would you like to tag in on that? None of us are geotechnical engineers or geologists, but Elise, Danae, any response to that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab here. So from what I've been reading, so in the soil they have water-soluble compounds, and so as they begin to heat, when the fire moves through, and then when it begins to cool down, they form a layer at the top of the soil, and so that's how it changes from having them a little bit more dispersed, where the soil is still porous, to then forming that solid layer across the top, which then prevents the water absorption.
And one thing, and me and my little weird stories or ways I remember things. You're gonna get another one, sorry guys. And one thing that one of the Forest Service guys, as he was presenting on some of our meetings, he talked about that, you know, as it bakes it, it's almost like, depending how you know, how high the heat gets on the fire, that it is almost like a kiln oven. And it just is like, you know, if you were to fire something in a kiln when you're doing pottery, how after that the water's just going to run off. So that's one of those things that always stuck in my head as well, is it's kind of like that. It just bakes it that way.
All right. Well, we do have one more. This will have to be our last question. This is from Richard. He says, will all burn scars be reseeded, and is this the responsibility of the state or federal government, or does this depend on who owns the land, BLM, Forest Service, etc.? So who puts it back together?
So there is an agency that, and it's slipping my mind at the moment. It's part of our post-wildfire team, or part of our team, and there is a state agency who partners with others and does that at the state. And like I said, it's slipping my mind what that agency is. It doesn't happen for all fires. No, that's a bear report. That's a team that gets together and goes out and checks and sees where the burn scar is. Oh yeah, it's not coming to me anyway. We do have somebody that goes out and does it. It does depend on, some of it depends on what land it's on. Some of it depends on if they think that reseeding will actually make a difference. There are some areas where it may not make a difference, and they do try and look at, you know, every little bit of it. And I know we are doing, I literally, thousands and thousands of acres are being reseeded here in Utah. It's been a huge effort. I want to say it's going towards, you know, millions, but there's a lot going on right now with reseeding.
Okay.
Brian, you did mention bear, and it is for people who are interested in learning a little bit about how the agencies do work. There is the BEAR team, BAER, Burned Area Emergency Response, is a team comprised of several folks. I believe it is managed through the Forest Service, but I'm not positive on that. Kathy could probably correct me, or at least some of these BEAR teams are. And obviously Forest Service has a lot of science and knowledge about soils and soil health and forestry type topics. That burned area emergency response team will deploy after that fire, and they'll assess what's going on. How steep is the slope? Who is below it? Now it might be outside. It might be private properties that are outside of a federal piece of property. But that second part of Richard's question, yes, the answer is yes. It is probably the responsibility of whoever is managing the land. And we, the Corps of Engineers, are only one of many entities and agencies that have science on our side to do some application, and then we kind of get together and say what might be the best solution for this particular piece of land. And sometimes fires should burn. I mean, fire is a healthy thing. It just, when it gets that urban interface, then we have some challenges. So the soil health question is fantastic, and the responses to that are also really, I commend you on thinking about that. Kathy is certainly the person to run questions through for the state as far as floodplains, but the burned area emergency response teams are generally those first people in the field after the fire.
Yeah, and usually with that, it's like NOAA, there's NRCS and NOAA and the Forest Service and a lot of different team members that come together for that. So, yeah.
Well, Kathy, with your permission, I'd like to throw up your last poll.
Yes, please.
Okay, so everybody, if you could answer this question real quick. Do you have flood insurance? Yes or no? We'd like to know how our messaging is doing, encouraging people to get flood insurance.
It's an anonymous poll. So
it's anonymous. We won't be tracking you down. 50% have voted. We'll go for another 10 seconds.
Kathy, I know you're really, really itching to know the answer to this. So
I am, and I'm getting ready to share my outreach commercial, and I'd actually like a raise of hands if people stick around.
Just about to close the vote. All right, we'll close it right now. Kathy, just from your prior experience, before I post the numbers, do you want to guess?
Well, I know what recent numbers, well, within the last couple of months have been only 3% of Utahns, so I'm hoping it's better than that. Please.
All right, let's see. You've got 10%.
Wow.
All right.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. It's probably Utah County, because I'm saying the Utah County numbers have been going up with the wildfires. So I would hope that if I can go in and share this commercial with you that we've put together, I would love a raise of hands after you see it to see who has seen it before this time. And I would like to know, you can put any comments in of how you feel about our little commercial, because we have been trying to get our citizens aware of their flood risk and that the best way to mitigate it is through flood insurance. So this is pulling up right now.
Flood insurance? Floods don't happen where we live.
Even in areas outside of designated flood zones, water damage caused by melting snow, water main breaks, blocked drains, and heavy rains from sources outside the home aren't covered by homeowners insurance. In fact, 97% of Utah isn't covered by the right kind of flood insurance in the event of floods caused by overflowing rivers, a neighbor's broken sprinkler system, or even antiquated wooden drainage pipes built by Salt Lake pioneers in the 1800s. Repairs for just 1 inch of water damage can cost up to $26,000. In the case of a natural disaster and only in the case of areas approved for aid, the Federal Emergency Management Agency individual assistance payout averages $4,800. More than 20% of flood insurance claims come from low to moderate risk floodplain areas. And according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, heavy rains in short periods of time are occurring more.
Just put a hand, raise a hand if you've seen that before.
One person has seen it. Nope, they decided they hadn't seen it before.
Well, that's very sad. Well, hopefully you've seen it now. We're trying to get, we have this and another one and some other information out there on floodfacts.utah.gov. Just trying to make you guys aware that anytime where it rains, it can flood, and make sure you mitigate your risk.
All right. Well, thank you very much to our panelists here. And again, a panelist invites you to answer some of the questions in the questions section before you take off. And I'd encourage all of our listeners that are still hanging on, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn the time over to Wade in just a moment, but I want to ask, what is one thing you plan on using from this class? Is there anything that you learned or anything that's now on your to-do list that you're going to do because you attended this flood after fire class? So invite the listeners to answer or put that in the questions section, even though it'll be an answer to my question. And I turn the time back to Wade.
All right, thank you very much, Brian, Kathy, Danae, Elise, and Hunter. Appreciate that great information, that great presentation. Appreciate you supporting our Be Ready Utah webinar today. And that is our last session, so thank you all of our attendees as well. Before you jump off, just a quick reminder, there will be an exit poll when you leave. Just a couple of questions. We encourage you to please complete that exit survey. That allows you to rate the effectiveness of the webinar today and the topics of interest or that interested you. And along with Brian's question, as far as what did you learn from that presentation, we'd like to ask you for that same question for the whole webinar today. What is one thing that you've learned today that has been helpful and through the entire webinar, any of the sessions? And again, tomorrow we will start up again at 1 o'clock Utah time and go again till 5 o'clock with 4 other sessions. Let me quickly pull those up here. Again, we have some great topics tomorrow. When the grid lets you down, no power, no problem. How to stay warm, cook safely, and see without power. We'll also talk about lessons learned from an earthquake and have another panel of earthquake preparedness experts. We'll have conversations on preparedness, just general preparedness ideas and philosophies. We will have our final session, water treatment and storage. Great topics, great preparedness information. Hopefully you will join us again tomorrow at the same time, following the same link that you used for today, I believe. You just go to that same email and same link that will get you back into the webinar tomorrow. Appreciate you joining us again. Go to the Be Ready Utah YouTube channel to watch the videos in about a week or so and share those with others. Go to bereadyutah.gov for all of our brochures and other preparedness information there. Again, please take a minute to fill out the exit survey, throw in a few of the answers. What are you taking away from this today? And I think with that, we will call this a webinar. Again, thank you to all of our presenters, our moderators, our planners, Kathy Holder, especially for all the behind the scenes platform support, and to all of you for joining us today. Have a great evening.